And that's a rather shocking realization. Because you see, our culture is geared to the idealism of having the good without the evil. Of using medicine to bring us to the point where we don't need to die so that we can have life without death. Of reforming and psychotherapizing people so that we can have all good law-abiding citizens and no criminals. All sane people and nobody in the asylums. And yet, from another point of view, you can see that were there no sick people, there would be no incentive for the study of medicine. Were there no crazy people, there would be no incentive to the study of psychology, finding out about the human mind. And were there no wicked people, there would be no puzzle and thinking about the problems of ethics. So that you arrive sometimes at this funny point of view where you see that everybody, however bad, has an essential contribution to the totality of life. And you don't know quite what to do with that kind of insight. At one point you're inclined to say it's completely subversive, and yet from another point of view you say that it isn't subversive, because it shows that everything is somehow in its proper place. But at any rate, that is the point of view which is very largely brought about by these. So there is then a kind of a threat in this sort of experience. And now let's go on to consider, is it a fantasy or is it in any way true? Let's suppose I experienced that my own individual existence is completely continuous with the existence of everything else. That I'm a part of nature, not merely a part, but an expression of the whole activity of the universe. Is that a hallucination? How am I to judge? The criteria by which we judge today are the ideas of our scientists. And if I go to the biologist, the physicist, the chemist, I find out that his description of me as a human being fits better with this so-called hallucination than does my normal state of consciousness. In my normal state of consciousness, in which I am a product of a certain culture which believes that every individual is a separate soul or Freudian ego inhabiting a physical vehicle, I feel myself alienated from and separate from everything else that goes on. But if I'm described by a biologist, I'm nothing of the kind. A biologist describes me as an organism environment, not an organism in an environment, but an organism environment. The way that he describes my behavior, he describes my behavior as the same thing as the behavior of my environment. He'll go further than that. He'll describe the behavior of my environment as the same thing as my behavior. We are a single field of process, or what is sometimes called a transaction. In other words, the fact that the sun is light is the result of my nervous system. My nervous system turns the sun into light, and the sun would not be light unless my nervous system and your nervous system made it so. So in a way you make the world. At the same time, your nervous system is in the same physical world as the sun. And likewise, sometimes under the influence of psychedelic chemicals, you feel that everything that's going on is simply inside your head. The next moment you feel that your head is inside everything that's going on. And then you feel that everything that's going on inside your head, it sort of caps itself like a game that children play. Well, both points of view are true. But what I'm going to say is the feeling of my being continuous with everything that's happening in the physical world fits the facts as described by science more accurately than the normal subjective feeling of my being something merely in the world, being pushed around by it to some extent, and being able, on my own part, to push it around to some extent, but basically a stranger in the earth. So upon that sort of criterion, I feel that the change of consciousness induced by such a chemical fits the facts of scientific observation better than the normal kind of consciousness which I've been taught in my family and my schooling, where I've been given a feeling of my own existence that is simply the mythology of a particular culture. And also I go on to feel that it may be quite important that my state of consciousness be changed for our general survival. Because if I feel myself alien from and against my natural environment, the likelihood is that I shall pick a fight with it, and that I shall use technological power to destroy it, and not to cooperate with it. This, I can see, is what our culture is already doing. And therefore, it impresses itself upon me that there is a certain urgency for human beings' minds being changed so that they can cooperate with their environment and not fight it. So then the idea occurs to me, is it perhaps providential that at this time in history a chemical agent makes itself available which will enable us to treat the disease of alienated consciousness, of hostility to the world? Could it be as providential that this is found in the 20th century as Jenner found smallpox vaccine in the 19th century? That's not inconceivable. Arthur Koestler, who is a very sober gentleman and with whom I've had considerably bitter arguments about his estimation of Oriental philosophy, has in his book The Ghost and the Machine come out with the notion that maybe the only thing that can save technological man from destroying himself is to treat his neurology directly, to alter it. And some neurologists are seriously beginning to talk about the necessity for peace technology. We might call it chemical peace fair. But there is among so many of us a resentment to this whole idea, because we say it means then that you are reducing the human spirit to mere chemicals, and that we cannot tolerate. I remember being at a meeting of psychiatrists, and someone was talking about the marvelous uses of things like thorazine and rezapine in treating mental disturbance. And this man said, if I ever thought that my profession of psychiatry would be reduced to giving pills, I would become a used automobile salesman. The feeling, in other words, this is a great put down on human beings. If all that you are is chemicals, so what? But our experience again and again and again in the use of these chemicals does not go along with that view. We have found that, and this has been pretty much statistically verified by people working at Silver Springs, Maryland, which is the official United States Center for Research with Psychedelics, that there is no necessary connection between taking, say, LSD and having a mystical experience. It may happen and it may not happen, because it depends on factors beyond the drug itself. It depends on to whom it is given, and under what circumstances it is